Today I wanted to take a few minutes to go over how to create and design a bridge that's prepared for 3D printing. So today we're going to look at a program called Google SketchUp, which is available for free from Google. You can download it for both Windows and Mac. So the first thing we want to do is open the program. And when you first open it, this dialog will come up. And what we're concerned about right now is the templates. Google provides all kinds of templates for us to use, but the one that we want is this very last one, 3D printing millimeters. And so what that does is it sets our scale in millimeters, so everything we do will need to be in millimeters. Also, it gives us this nice box which defines our printing area. So our model has to be confined within this box if we're going to print it. So if you're using SketchUp for the first time, there's also two extensions that we want to use. So if we go to Windows, Extension Warehouse, we want to add the Solid Inspector. And let's see, if it comes up, it's right here, Solid Inspector 2. It may take a few minutes to load, but it's this one right here, Solid Inspector with the little square. So go ahead and add that extension. And then the second one we want is STL Exporter. And so if you search STL, it's SketchUp STL. And so we also want to add that extension. So both of these extensions will be very, very helpful as we're working. Alright, so the next thing I want to point out is three hotkeys that I use very frequently. The first one is the orbit, which we have the orbit button right here at the top, but we can also use the O to jump to it real quick. And the orbit allows us to orbit around our model. The second hotkey that I use a lot is the pan, which is abbreviated with an H, and it's actually a little hand. And it allows you to drag and move around your model. And then the last one is the space bar, which just gives us an arrow that we can select or deselect things with. We can also use boxes to select things, but sometimes that's not as specific as we want to be. And then the last one, I guess, is zooming in and out, which we use with the scroll key, either on our mouse or however we scroll. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First thing we want to do is create the base of our bridge. So we can do this anywhere inside of our print area. I'm going to create the rectangle that will serve as the base. And so our bridge needs to be 12 centimeters long. So I'm going to make my bridge a little bit bigger than that and say 13 centimeters. But remember, I'm working in millimeters, so I need to put it in millimeters. So 130 millimeters by, I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger than it needs to be, 60 millimeters. And you can see I can type in my dimensions and they'll appear in the bottom right hand corner. And so once I type them in, I can go ahead and press enter and I'll create the rectangle of that dimension that I typed in down here. Great. So after I create my initial rectangle, I'm going to go ahead and delete the frame, the box. It's nice to kind of delete it early on because sometimes it'll join with your model and it can cause big problems later on. Okay, so the next thing I want to point out is this is just a flat plane. It is two-dimensional. There's no third dimension to it. It is only 2 dimensions. And so we cannot print two-dimensional stuff. We can only print three-dimensional stuff. So I need to make it three-dimensional by using my pull tool. And with this, I can click on the surface and I can give it a third dimension. And so I can pull it up and down. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, as I move it up and down, it gives me the distance that it's moving up and down. So again, I can just type in whatever distance I want. I want my bridge to be, let's say, 7 millimeters thick. So I'm just going to type 7 and then press enter, and it does it for me. And so now I have my bridge. So the next thing is I want to create legs. So again, I'll go to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to create my legs. I'm going to make them 5 by 5 millimeters. So I'll just type 5, 5, and it'll give me my rectangles. or squares rather. Let me put one in each corner. There we go. And so now the next step is to make them actually legs. So I'm going to use my pull tool again to select just the square, and then I'll pull it out 50 millimeters since I want my bridge to be 5 centimeters tall. So I'll type in 50 and do all 4 like such. There we go. And so that gives me my bridge. It looks like a table, but it will be my bridge. Okay, so this is a very, very simple bridge, but I want to make my bridge a little bit more advanced than this. And so I want to add some structural supports going down this way with triangles. And so I'm going to do this by using my line tool. And if you take your line tool and drag it along the edge, it'll snap to endpoints and midpoints. And so I'm going to start right here at the midpoint, which it snaps to. And then I'm going to click, and then I'm going to draw and drag along this edge until it snaps to the next midpoint. There it is right there. And that gives me my support. I'm going to put in my second one. I'm going to do the same thing. Drag along the edge until it snaps. There it is. Okay. So, you can see it gives me the little supports, but we can see that they're flat planes. They're only two-dimensional triangles right now. And so this is a good time to illustrate what our solid inspector does. So this is the extension that we added in the beginning, and it tells us if our object is a solid or not. If it is a solid, it can be 3D printed. If it's not, then it can't be. So to use it, I'm going to triple click on everything, and then click on my solid inspector. And notice it pops up with 2 errors, external faces. And so what that means is we have 2 faces that are 2-dimensional. And again, we can't print 2-dimensional stuff. And so sometimes it'll give us a fix, sometimes it won't. But in this case, our fix is to delete the faces. And so notice now, if I run it again, it says everything is shiny, which means our object is capable of being 3D printed. But, of course, I don't want to delete those faces. So I'm going to undo, which is just Control-Z. And instead of deleting them, I need to make them 3-dimensional. So I can do that with my Push-Pull tool. And so I can click on it, and then pull the face out. And then if I slide it along the edge, it'll pull it out flush with the edge. And so I'm going to do that with both of them, like such. So now, again, I'm going to triple click everything and run my inspector again. So notice now it gives us a different error, internal faces, but we can easily fix that. And so now everything is shiny, which means our model can be 3D printed. But we're not quite done yet. It's just a good idea to run this tool as often as possible, because if you catch these errors early, they're really easy to fix. But when you finish and you don't ever run it and you run into errors, it can be a lot harder to fix at the very, very end. So we want to run this tool out often so we can fix those errors as we go. Alright, so now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to grab my line tool and drag along the edge to find the midpoint. There it is. And then I'll drag along this side to find the midpoint. There it is. And then, there we go. And so now this time, since I'm kind of looking at it from the opposite side, I'm just going to type in the dimensions. And so I know it's 5 millimeters thick, so I'll just type in 5 millimeters for each. Okay, so now again, I'll get my select tool, and I'll triple click everything and run my tool. And again, I can fix that, and it gives me a ready to print object. So the other thing that I want to keep an eye on is my volume. So I can triple click everything, right click, and then go to make group. And what grouping it does is it makes it one object essentially. So I can't select individual parts of the object anymore. I can only select the whole thing. And so then I can right click again and go to Entity Info. And right here, it tells me my volume. And so it gives me my volume in cubic millimeters, which is 74,600 cubic millimeters. In centimeters, that's 74.6 cubic centimeters. So I'm getting close to my limit, but I still have about 25 cubic centimeters left to play with. So the last thing that I'm going to add, well, before I can do anything, I need to get rid of the grouping so I can select individual things again. So the way I can do that is to select my object, right click, and go to Explode. And so that allows me to select individual things again. So last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create little cross beams right here that go across. And so I'm going to go to my rectangle tool. I'm going to draw rectangles, or squares rather. Notice it'll kind of click to a square right there. Or you can also type in your dimensions of 5, 5. Okay, so I draw my rectangle, and then I'm going to grab my pull tool. I'm going to pull it out to the neighboring edge right there. And then I'm going to hit the space bar to get my select and run my solid tool again. And we'll fix the one error. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to orbit with the O, spin around, use my hand, and then select the rectangle. And there's my square. And then I'll pull it out. There we go. And so now again, spacebar to select, and I'll run my tool one more time and fix the error. Okay, so then the last thing I want to do, well, one more thing that I want to do, is I want to check in on my volume again. So I'm going to get my pointer, triple click everything, make it a group, and then Entity Info. So I'm at 77 cubic centimeters. So I still have quite a bit. However, we always want to conserve as much plastic as possible. So one thing that we can do to conserve is make these little triangle supports hollow. And so I can do that really easily with SketchUp has an offset tool. And you can see this is its logo right here. It's kind of two circles with an arrow going through them. I select that, and it allows me to offset an edge. And so I'm going to select this edge. Oops, that's the wrong edge. Let's try it from the top. There we go. So it allows me to pick that edge, and I can drag it in to create a new surface. And so I'm going to select 4 millimeters, and it auto corrects. And then I'm going to select this center part. I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to do the same thing on here. 4, and then I'll delete the center. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So offset. There we go. And then I'll delete the inside triangle. Okay, so you can see now we can see straight through those parts. Great. So let's go ahead and run our inspector, our solid inspector again. Triple click everything. And notice it gives us 4 face holes. So what that means is if we zoom in on one, well, if we click on the inspector, you can see it highlights in red the error. And so you can see these red lines, and it's highlighting the hole. Oh, it offers to fix it for us. Let's see what that does. It fixes it, but it just does exactly what we didn't want. So I'm going to undo that, and we can fix it manually because the tool doesn't fix it the way that we want. Okay, so basically the error is that this has no inside, and so it's a hole inside the solid, and so again it turned these edges into planes. So I can fill those by creating tops on them. So if I select my rectangle tool and select that corner, and then this corner, it fills it, fills it with a rectangle. And so we can see now, that's a good view. So we can see now there's a solid edge right there, but we still have a hole right here. So let's go ahead and fix that hole too. And select the rectangle, and I'll go from opposite corners. So that corner to that corner. And then I'll delete the center again. I'll delete that center. Okay, and so you can see now we have an edge right there. We have an edge right there. And it also put an edge on the top for us. And so now that fixes that problem, and then we can do the same thing over here. Okay, oh, I did all three at once. Perfect. So now I have two hollow supports right there. I can easily do that to the other side as well, but I'm going to leave it for right now, because you get the general idea. And so from here, I can continue adding as many features as I want to. If I wanted to, I could take the pull tool. Let's go ahead and deselect. Take the pull tool and take this and pull it out to the other side, and then I'd have a hollow support all the way through. If I wanted to, I could do the same thing and slide the solid support all the way across. There's all kinds of different things I could do. I could add support beams across the top right here, but just remember, with all of this, we're going to end up having overhangs in this spacing right here. As well as inside these triangles, it's all going to be filled with support material. Alright, but once we're happy with our design, the last thing we want to do is select everything, run the solid inspector one more time. See, here's an example of an error that we can't fix automatically. And it seems to be something with inside there. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the holes. There we go. So I'm back to where I started, but it gives you an example of how some of the different things you can do. Alright, so now I'm going to run my inspector. Everything is shiny. So now I have a model that I can 3D print. And I'm going to go ahead and group it. And then entry info. And check my volume one last time. This needs to be within our limits. So I'm at 77 cubic centimeters, which is fine. Great. So the last thing I'll do is File, Save As, and save this as a SketchUp file. And then also export STL. Accept these, the defaults are fine. Export, choose a place to save it. I'm putting it on my desktop, and there we go. And then I can go ahead and close SketchUp, and it creates my SketchUp original file where I can go in and edit my file, and then it also creates my STL, which is what I need for slicing and ultimately printing. So this has just been a very basic example of some of the things that you can do. Naturally, there's all kinds of possibilities available. So the biggest thing is to experiment, to play with it, and to see what you can do with your bridge. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. And until next time.